Hi everyone, I hope you're doing very well. So today was the special talk, and it was to set the scene for next Friday's memorial. This is what they sometimes do, don't they? Sort of like an appetizer before the main meal. So the theme was, where can you find real hope? Well, I recorded it, I attended it, and I recorded it. But the only thing about recording from a distance is that you pick up a lot of outside noises. It's better to record from within the specific device rather than sat in a chair and recording it from where you are. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it's just sort of to build the appreciation of really what the memorial is all about. Now, a lot of people are being very scathing. A lot of people actually think, right, that going to heaven is an open ticket, and that if you choose to make supplication and get down on your knees and say sorry, that that's your automatic ticket to go to heaven. Or that another phrase is that it was God's original intention that all of us have the right to go to heaven. Well, if that was the case, then what would be the point of creating the earth in the first instance? Why create an earth and why create Adam? Why do all this if it was your divine right to go to heavens in the first place? It wouldn't make sense. You just you just wouldn't have even created the earth. I'm talking about from the creator's point of view. If everybody that ever lived was going to the heavens or going to heaven and to reside with Christ, there would have been no need for Christ to have come to the earth. There would have been no need for Adam. There'd be no need for the earth to even be created. You can't get your head around that fact. That's a fundamental fact. So the only logical conclusion is that it is not an open invitation, and it never was. That you have to have your spirit bear witness with God's spirit to be truly selected and deemed worthy of a heavenly existence. And so this talk didn't bring that point out that I've just mentioned then. It brought other significant points out. So I recorded it, like I say. I'm going to check the recording first. If I think it's good enough to post, I'll post it. If not, I won't post it because you need to hear it clearly. And that's all I have to say on that matter. Thank you.
It's true to say that we all face tragic events in life and we end up suffering in some way or other. And you'll know the suffering that you've gone through. Perhaps if you've been in the congregation for some time, you can look at other members and think how they have suffered, or perhaps how they're even suffering right now. So if we all have to face suffering at some point, then what can help? Well, in a word, hope. If we know that suffering is going to end, and if we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, then that helps us to keep on going. Of course, the problem is often after we face one tragic event, another one comes along. So, is there any hope that all suffering will end? Well, according to the Bible, the answer is yes. It holds out the only real hope for relief. Now, to some, that may just sound like wishful thinking. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at the evidence. We're also going to answer three questions. Firstly, why is there so much suffering? Secondly, what is the hope in the Bible? And the third question, why can we trust the Bible's hope? Let's answer that first question then. Why is there so much suffering? Well, our Creator views us as His children, and He doesn't want us to suffer. Why then do it? Well, just turn with me to Romans chapter 5 and verse 12. Romans 5 and verse 12. It says, that is why, just as through one man being Adam. Sin entered into the world and death through sin. And so death spread to all men because they had all sinned. So Adam and Eve were told that they could eat from all of the trees bar one. They chose to eat from that one tree and thus sinned. And because of that sin, they and their children grew old and died. We today get sick, grow old and die because we inherited it from our original family. So though we can see that God doesn't cause the suffering, he does allow it. Well, why is that? Well, if you're still in Romans, just turn forward a couple of chapters to Romans chapter 8. And we'll look at verses 20 to 22. Romans 8, verse 20. It says, "For the creation was subjected to futility, not by its own will, but through the one who subjected it, on the basis of hope. That the creation itself will also be set free from enslavement to corruption, and have the glorious freedom of the children of God. For we know that all creation keeps on growing together, being in pain together, until now." I'm sure straight away we can recognise the truthfulness in the words in verse 22 there, that all creation keeps on groaning together, being in pain together. But what about verses 20 and 21? What are they saying? Well, let's just go back to them and break them down, so if we can understand what's being said there. So first of all, we need to establish who is it talking about. So who was it that subjected creation to futility? Now, some would say Satan the devil or Adam, but it can't be either of these. Why? Because if we go back to it, it says that the one who subjects creation to futility does so on the basis of hope. And verse 21 describes that hope as being set free from enslavement to corruption. Neither Adam nor Satan could give such hope. Only Jehovah God could. So it's Jehovah that subjected creation to futility by allowing Adam and Eve to have children, but he did so on the basis of hope. Let's also establish what the creation is that's mentioned here as well. Because again, some would say it's all creation, it involves animals and plant life, but again, that can't be the case. Why? Well, if we go back to it, in verse 21, it says that the creation will have the glorious freedom of the children of God. And that can't be the case for animals and plants. It must therefore refer to mankind, to the creation that was affected by what we read earlier in Romans chapter 5, sin entering into the world, and thus death. Adam and Eve's rebellion in the Garden of Eden resulted in being subjected to what verse 20 describes as, right at the top there, you see the word futility. So I looked up the word in the dictionary, it said pointlessness or uselessness. Now, if you have a newish mobile phone like this one, quite often it will come with wireless charging. So I can put this on a pad, and without connecting any wires to it, it will charge up. But if you've got an older mobile phone, it won't. It wasn't designed for wireless charging. So putting that old phone on a charging pad, it's futile, it's pointless, it's useless, because it won't charge the phone. Also, the Greek Septuagint, it's the same word, futile, that wise King Solomon used when he said that everything is vanity. Well, the New World Translation now says futility, and the footnote is vanity. And when we think about it, we were made to live forever in the Garden of Eden and to extend its boundaries. Instead, we currently have a short, painful, often frustrating existence. Futility. Many people have asked, what is the point? And so we may wonder, why did God subject mankind to this painful existence? And was doing so fair and just? Well, we have to remember what Adam and Eve did. They had everything for a perfect and happy life. And yet they chose to rebel against God and to take sides with Satan, who had challenged Jehovah's sovereignty. They gave their backing to the idea that mankind would be better off without God, that they could rule themselves under Satan's influence. But we weren't designed to do that. Trying to do so is futile. It's just like trying to put an old mobile phone on a wireless charging pad. It simply doesn't work. So all Jehovah did was give them what they asked for. He allowed man to rule himself under Satan's influence. And really, under those circumstances, what could be more just than subjecting mankind to futility, but doing so on the basis of hope? We can see then that Jehovah is not the cause of the futility and the suffering that we face. Just think of a father trying to teach his young son how to ride the bike, and it gets to the point where the child thinks he can do it on his own. He doesn't need his dad's help anymore. Yet the father knows he's still unsteady and needs assistance, but he insists he can do it on his own. And he won't take his feet off the floor, sit on the bike, until his father backs away. The father tries to reason with him, but he won't listen. He's going to have to learn the hard way. So the father backs off, the child sets off, and very quickly he falls over on the grass and bangs his knee. Now the child will suffer the consequences of that banged knee, but we wouldn't say the father caused the pain and the suffering from that banged knee. Likewise, Jehovah does not cause our pain and suffering, for he has temporarily allowed it. But he's allowed it on the basis of hope. He's lovingly made arrangements for the descendants of Adam and Eve to see the end of that futility and to take great pleasure in what we read there, the glorious freedom of the children of God. Faithful mankind will never have to worry about descending into futility ever again. Jehovah will have established the rightfulness of his sovereignty for all time. So not only will God soon end the suffering, but like that injured knee would repair itself, he'll also undo all the harm caused by Satan. So we've answered that first question, why is there so much suffering? And we've also started to answer the second question, what hope does the Bible give? Well, let's just look more closely at that hope. Turn with me to Revelation 21. And we're going to read verses 3 and 4. Revelation 21, verse 3. With that I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, the tent of God is with mankind, and he will reside with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them. And he will wipe out every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Neither will mourning, nor outcry, nor pain be any more. The former things have passed away. God himself will be with them. They will be his people. God's people will not side with Satan. They will not challenge God's sovereignty. Instead, they will accept his guidance and his direction, and they will try and do what is right in his eyes. It also says that the tent of God is with mankind, all of mankind. So everyone will be following God's direction. And if we can have a look at the image that's up on the screen there, and just look at those pictures. So in the first pair of pictures there, does it remind us of the words in verse 4 about removing tears, death and pain? Just imagine a world where there are no cemeteries because no one is going to die, where there are no hospitals because nobody is going to be in pain or sick. And yet the hope in the Bible goes even further. At Acts 24 and verse 15 it says there is going to be a resurrection. So maybe this child we see was sick in hospital, perhaps even died, and has now been resurrected and reunited with his mother. You can just see the unimaginable joy on the mother's face. And just think about loved ones that you've lost being brought back to life, whether that be grandparents, parents, close friends, or in the example we have here, even our children. In the second pair of pictures, we see an old man, young again. Well, in Revelation, we read there would be no more pain and death. What leads to death? We usually grow old and die. So if we were to live to, say, 70 or 80 and look like the old man in the picture there, and we're limited in what we could do, then what would life be like if we continued to deteriorate but never died? No. God does not want us to be old and decrepit. He wants us to be at our peak, to be fit and healthy, just like the young man in the foreground. A fit, young, healthy version of ourselves, able to work hard, achieve much, and enjoy it. And it looks like he's got quite a bit of food there as well, doesn't it? Now just look at the third set of pictures. So the two children in the background, it looks like they're perhaps starving, begging for food. Is that when they call it hunger, pain? Well, we've already said there will be no pain. No pain and no death means no wars, which often leads to shortages and hunger. So there's going to be plenty of food. We can see them planting some in the bottom picture there. And so we see the two children, instead of begging for food, are enjoying life, doing what we think children should do, playing together. But again, just to expand on this, turn with me to Psalm 72 and verse 7. Psalm 72, 7. In his days the righteous will flourish, peace will abound until the moon. So with only God's people on earth, there will be no wicked, there will be peace. Not only peace, but with good people, security. There'll be no need for bars, locks and alarms. We'll be able to trust all those around us to live without fear and in happiness. And did you notice a phrase at the start of verse 7? It says that the righteous will flourish. Again, I looked up the word flourish in a thesaurus, and it said bloom, blossom, do well, succeed, thrive. And don't we often use a word in connection with plants and flowers? Because they'll flourish when they're in the ideal environment. Thinking about the conditions we've been describing, you don't think that the righteous will flourish because they'll be in the ideal environment. And then looking at the final pair of pictures, we're wondering in the background, what's she going through? Is she suffering from depression or some other mental illness? Well, the scriptures we already look at illustrate these pictures. We can see that she has gone from feeling that everything is futile to flourishing. She's gone from wanting to curl up in a ball to being happy and standing tall. But what about all the painful memories she still has from those dark days? Well, just turn with me to Isaiah 65 and verse 17. Isaiah 65 verse 17 says, "For look, I'm creating new heavens and a new earth, and the former things will not be called to mind, nor will they come up into the past." These painful memories will be cut off at source. The cause of the hurtful memories, whether it be mental, physical, emotional, will no longer exist. And when we look at those pictures, we see that not only will the memories be gone, but they'll be replaced with something much better. We'll enjoy life to the full, and we'll have so many pleasant memories to cherish and to think of. So we've seen the hope that the Bible gives summarised by that image. And it's Jesus' ransom sacrifice that makes these blessings possible. So we warmly invite you to join us on Friday, April the 15th, to commemorate Jesus' death and to learn more. The next big question we've got is, can we trust the Bible's hope? Well, the Bible itself says that it can be trusted. But is that not a bit like me saying, I'm trustworthy when you've not really met me or you don't know me? Me simply saying it doesn't make it true. So let's have a look at the bold claim that the Bible makes and then consider the evidence. So the claim is in 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 16. Timothy 3:16, it says, all scripture is inspired of God and beneficial for teaching, for reproving, for setting things straight, for disciplining in righteousness. There are not many books that claim to be inspired of God, or to be written as though they've got the authority of being written by God himself. The Bible is unique, and it gives evidence that it is inspired of God. So when it comes to nature, if God was behind the Bible, then we'd expect it to be accurate, perhaps even ahead of its time. Now, unfortunately, we've not got the time this morning to go into any of these in great detail. So if you really want to know whether you can trust the Bible, then just make a note of the scriptures that we're briefly going to look at and do some research yourself, or ask one of Jehovah's Witnesses to go through them with you. So although the Bible is not a science textbook, at Job 36 and verses 27 and 28, it accurately describes the water cycle. And that was a long time before man could explain the basic process scientifically. Another example is Psalm 139 and verse 16, where it says, your eyes even saw me as an embryo. All its parts were written in your book. So David speaking of an embryo developing according to a book 3,000 years ago. Genetics is a fairly recent discovery, and scientists have described the code as being like a dictionary filled with words made of letters of an alphabet. And scientists have also described the genome, or the complete set of DNA, as the book of life. How was the Bible so accurate thousands of years before scientists? And we probably know it's so difficult to predict the future. For example, when did we know that Russia would attack the Ukraine? There were certainly indicators beforehand, but we didn't know for sure until it pretty much happened. Yet compare that to what the Bible said. It foretold the destruction of ancient Babylon 200 years in advance. That's Isaiah chapters 44 and 45. Not only that, but it named the man Cyrus as the one conquering that mighty city. It also said he would drive the river and enter the city through open gates. Who would have predicted that? Yet history confirms every detail of this prophecy was fulfilled. And in Isaiah chapter 13, it also says that she would be desolate and never be inhabited. Today, Babylon remains in ruins, as the Bible foretold. Another example, Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 13 to 15, foretold that Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, would become desolate, as dry as a desert. Again, who would predict such a thing regarding the capital? Yet Nineveh was so completely destroyed that for a time it was doubted whether it even existed. And then it was in the mid-19th century, archaeologists excavated the ruins. Let's just consider one more example that we can see being fulfilled. If you're still in 2 Timothy chapter 3, and just go to the start, and we're going to look at verses 1 to 5. Verse 1 says, "But know this, that in the last days, critical times, hard to deal with, will be here. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, haughty, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, disloyal, having no natural affection, not open to any agreement, slanderous, without self-control, fierce, without love of goodness, betrayers, headstrong, puffed up with pride, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, having an appearance of godliness, but proving false to its power, and from these turn away." To list so many things and to get them all right, and we could probably spend 5 minutes talking about each one of those phrases. So very briefly, I'm just going to pick out one phrase, and it's at the start of verse 3, where it says, "having no natural affection." Now we may think, well, how can that change? It's natural. And yet, it is lacking so much today. There are millions of children who are abused by members of their own family. In one African country, a third of men felt it was acceptable to beat up their wives. And it's not just women that suffer from domestic violence. In Canada, nearly 3 out of 10 men have been battered or otherwise abused by their partners, having no natural affection. Now, some would say that there's always been domestic violence, and it's just receiving more attention today than it has in the past. And it's true, it is receiving more attention today than it has in the past. But wasn't it being highlighted meant to reduce the number of cases? If there had not been an increased awareness, would the situation be even worse? So we briefly looked at a number of examples showing that we can trust the Bible's hope. And it is good for all of us to examine the scriptures and to look at the examples and the evidence that we've considered and other examples as well, to build up and to strengthen our own trust in the Bible. So just please watch this video of individuals who found real hope by studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses.
I was 17 then. My brother and I were riding a motorcycle. Everything went so fast that my brother couldn't even react. Lying on the asphalt, I realized that I didn't feel my lower body. I had surgery on my neck that evening. I really hoped I would get well. After that, I ended up in a rehabilitation center. A nurse who worked there was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. While I was there, she told me about paradise and that people would be healed there. But it seemed too beautiful to be true for me, especially because I had never been in contact with religion before, nor thought about God. I argued with her that this was not true, but she always had very logical answers. And then I started reading, just to prove to the witnesses that what they believed was wrong. As I studied the Bible, I realized that it was very logical. The Bible can be compared to a puzzle. If the pieces are scattered on the table, then you don't really see the whole picture. You need to put it together. At Hebrews 11:1, we learn that true faith is based on convincing evidence. If a person does not try to find evidence, then for him it is all just a fairy tale. When I found logical evidence of why there is suffering, why people die, and what will fix those problems, there was real peace in my heart.
When I was a teenager, my grandmother died. This was a very serious blow for me because she was the closest person I had and I loved her very much. Some relatives told me that I'd have to perform certain rituals so that grandma's spirit wouldn't harm me. But I thought, if she loved me when she was alive, why would she want to hurt me after she died? It seemed totally illogical to me. Since we lived in an atheistic society, my parents told me it was just part of the evolutionary process. Animals die and people die. A while later, I started studying the Bible, and I saw that the resurrection hope was very logical. It was much more logical than the teaching of purgatory, hell, and others like it. I became one of Jehovah's Witnesses. After many years, I once again encountered a series of very tough losses. First, my friend died, and a year after that, my father died. It was very difficult emotionally to get over all of that because my dad was someone who was very close to me, and I realized that I needed to renew my hope. I reviewed again all the evidence that the Bible provides, and once again I was convinced that it is very logical. When you don't understand what is happening around you, you are prepared to latch on to any hope. And unfortunately, people usually grab hold of the first thing that they are told. But the Bible tells us clearly what happens to the dead, why it happens, and when it will come to an end. And it gives evidence to support this.
Did you notice the man said, when I found logical evidence, why there is suffering, why people die, and what will fix these problems, there was real peace. How good is that? To have real peace in our heart. How did he get it? The same way as the lady. And she said, I realised I needed to renew my hope. I reviewed again all the evidence the Bible provides, and once again I was convinced it was very logical. Like those two in the video, we have to renew our hope, making it sure and firm, by looking at the evidence, by reminding ourselves of it, and by keeping that hope clearly in our minds. Then, when we face problems, we can look to the future with joy and confidence, knowing that hope in the Bible is real and will soon become a reality.